Hello, everyone. I'm Vi. I'll be your host today. I'm an e-commerce marketing expert at Omnisend. And today's topic is something that's probably on all our minds all the time as business owners and as marketeers. And the topic is revenue. And wouldn't it be nice if someone shared a roadmap, exact steps they took to get to, let's say, 1.5 million in revenue using email marketing and SMS marketing? And today we're going to do exactly that. We have Jesse from Vyber Media, and he's going to share how they scaled their client email revenue to $1.5 million with Omnisend. So, Jesse, would you like to say hello?
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm super excited for this. It's crazy. Every time I do a webinar with Omnisend, there's people from all over the world on these. So I'm very excited for this and hopefully it's useful for everybody. So thanks for having me and I'm excited.
I'm so excited for everyone as well. And it doesn't matter whether you're in US or UK, this is super applicable across the board. And Jesse has a wealth of knowledge on this topic. So use the Q&A box that we have to add your questions. So a couple of things for you to know before we start. This session is being recorded and you will receive the recording in a couple of days. And if you have any questions, as I said, at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A tab. So you can pop your questions in there and we will answer those at the end of the presentation. Okay, Jesse, the stage is yours.
Let's do it. So for a little bit of framing, number one, this session is being recorded. And I believe the Omnisend team will send both the recording and any of the slides after. So if you miss anything or want to go back to it, rest assured that you will get it. Feel free to ask your questions at the Q&A tab, and they'll bring it up to the top, and I'm happy to answer anything. So please feel free to put in questions, notes, any of that. And here's the brief agenda. So number one, what are the foundations for a scalable, profitable email program? If you were starting today, net new, what needs to happen? And then as your brand grows or as your email program becomes more complex, what are the levers to pull for growth, both internally on Omnisend to get more performance out of your existing base? And then number two, how can you add more emails to your list to be able to scale that audience? And then we'll do a Q&A. So what to expect? Number one, a 90-day game plan that you to add over 20% of your total aggregate revenue via email and SMS. We've seen brands do much better than that, but just as a baseline, I think that's a fair assumption. Just off of email, if you were at zero, and then a framework for brands at every stage. So I totally understand there's a wide mix of business owners on here, or CMOs, or VPs of marketing. And I think these principles apply whether your business literally just started and has $10,000 in revenue to if you're doing 100 million bucks in revenue and you want to add email as a channel or you're scaling with Omnisend. I really do think the principles apply. And we've seen it on both sides of the spectrum with businesses. So that's the what to expect. Here's a little bit about me. I won't spend too much time, but just to give a little bit of background. So at Vyber, we've worked with a variety of 7 to 9 figure brands. I've actually run this business, crazy enough, since I was 16 years old. So I've done email, SMS, performance marketing, growth marketing for quite a bit of my life and spent time there. And then I did this while I was in college at Cornell. I then joined Goldman Sachs, worked within their sort of a performance marketing role even there. And then after 10 months, left to go full time at Vyber. And then on the bottom is just some of the places we've been seeing and some of the work we've done with our clients. So the case study we're going to be walking through today, and the principles on what we're going to use is aggregated a bunch of different clients. The reason I'm using HB Sports as an example is we did a case study with Omnisend on HB Sports probably, I don't know, a month ago. And you can go check it out. If you go to Omnisend Success Stories, you'll be able to see the entire case study there. So almost as a follow-up on that, the case study showed these numbers, and now I want to dive into the number one question was, that's great, but how do I do that? Either with an agency, without an agency, in-house. So these are the numbers we're benchmarking off of, which was HB Sports, we had 135,000 email and SMS subscribers in about 2 years, and then ended up adding $1.5 million in annual revenue just on Omnisend. So not in their entire business, $1.5 million in annual email revenue that's growing about 55% year over year, which has been great. So, and you can see real numbers here. So like $4.5 million over the time period. You'll notice here a big part of it is automations, which we'll spend time talking about. I think that we'll talk about that later in the slide, and I would highly recommend you pay attention there because I think it's probably the most untapped piece of email marketing out there at the moment. and then just some numbers on email subscribers and SMS. So let's get into it. So basically, the foundations that I want to talk about on the top are what are the 5 key foundations, principles, things you need to know to take either your thing from 0 to 100, 100 to 1,000, the 0 to 1 of email marketing to make sure either if you're starting it or you want to fix it, let's make sure we get these 5 things down. So we're going to dive into user opt-in, segmentation, your actual best practices for sending email campaigns, which automations matter so you don't lose your mind, and how simple it is to really set up. Because I think there's a misconception that it's a crazy process and setting one automation up is going to take 3 months. That's not the case. We'll talk about it. And then deliverability. I think that one's also an untapped one on people wonder, and we've seen clients all the time say, our numbers were down prior. Why? And usually it's a deliverability issue that is hidden in the back because people don't know where to check because it's hard. So we'll run through how to do all of that just on the foundations. And then section 2, we'll be talking about how to scale. So let's quickly talk about website opt-in. We've tested 1 million. And again, we're going to use HB for the example here just because based off of the case study, but we see this across the board in aggregate. Our general recommendation is use a 2-step welcome form to prevent drop-off. So we integrate with Omnisend. The Omnisend pop-up integrates with Shopify. And what we found works best, because you could put all of the info on one slide, you can make it very complex. We find that there's massive performance drop-off. So our strategy is use a lead magnet up here. So like it could be a shopping spree giveaway. It could be a one-time discount. You could split test 1 million lead magnets. That doesn't concern me as much. But we always recommend get first name and email top of the funnel because most people, if they're visiting a website and want to claim something, are both able and willing to give their first name and email. I would not put SMS on there most of the time because a lot of people don't want to share your number. And even if it's optional, a lot of people don't understand that. So they'll just X out rather than giving that valuable information up front. So we recommend capture first name, capture the email, and then step 2, you'll see right here, that's where you can get all the exciting stuff because if they X out of that slide, you still have their first name and email. You could still put them in a welcome series. But once they've already put that in, they're more likely to follow on to the latter step, which is join our SMS list. You can give another benefit if they go do it. And you'll collect phone number for this one. It's a baseball and softball brand. So we say, what products are you interested in? Like baseball, fast pitch, slow pitch, whatever it is. And we'll talk about this in the automations. But why it's important is you're getting all of the intel on your buyer or your prospective buyer to be able to funnel them through the proper welcome series that makes sense for them. So that's how we handle website opt-in. And here's the numbers. So once you have a website opt-in, immediately funnel them into personalized paths based off of their behavior. So you can see here, we have like you want to split into buyers, non-buyers, and then within each of those segments, a preference-based decision split. So like I said, if they're a baseball buyer, I want to treat them very differently than if they're a slow pitch buyer. It's a different person, different products, different average order values, different preferences, different sending cadences, all of that. But you can see here, like significant revenue just off the top, even on, I honestly don't remember the exact time frame we did this on, but their welcome series alone has done well over $1 million in aggregate across the board. So that is very useful just to know on, I would break down no matter what. Buyers, non-buyers, they're very different audiences. And then I would do preference-based splits. So that's all top of funnel. This is the important part on what I was talking about. How do you split them? So like they opted in, now what? So you want to make sure that you're meeting them at the right part of their life cycle, because otherwise, if somebody just bought from you and you say, hey, welcome, and we want you to buy, they're going to be like, what do you mean? I just spent money. Why are you giving me a discount now? So I would be very cognizant of, like, we see a lot of brands that are like, people are so unhappy because they're saying that they want a discount on our product. And a lot of times there's one welcome series with a 10% discount at the top. Somebody buys and puts their email in and then gets an email. Thanks so much for signing up. Get 10% on your first order. And they're like, can I make that retroactive? What happened there? So here's the splits. Like, we'll have different tags go down based on, is somebody a loyalty member or are they not? Did they open or engage? Did they not? And that's kind of how we're guiding the decision splits. And then up here, we're using a lot of data. So like if somebody's hitting baseball deals on the first email, we know how to sort them in the future on other emails, especially if they didn't tell us on that opt-in form. The number one question I think I get asked with opt-in is, oh my God, how do I segment the audience and what is the best way? And I think brands usually have a pretty good sense on what is the strongest way to do this. But our best practice, that no matter what the brand is, here are the 9 segments that or 8 segments that we recommend for every brand. And I'll quickly explain each of them. So cannot receive marketing. You have the name, but they don't want to get emails. I think it's helpful for lookalike audiences and just to retain your contacts and potential buyers. And you can see if and why they cannot receive marketing. So did they bounce? Is it a deliverability problem? Did they choose to opt out? Was there an email that caused a lot of spam risk and people opting out? Just gives more data. And then the next three are just levels of engagement. So we view engaged as open or click. Little bit of a different setting depending on how, but your 6 month engaged, your 90-day engaged, your 30-day hyper engaged. The 30-day hyper engaged is what we'll talk about a little bit later on. Those people want to be getting sent mail almost every day, and they're willing to do it. And then the rest of your base, your broad list, should be getting emails, which we'll talk about, but not as frequent as those core engaged people. Then buyers, 180-day buyers, so recent buyers, an SMS list who's engaged, and then a spam risk. And the spam, the one recommendation on this is make sure it's dynamic. And what I mean by dynamic is the way segments are set up in Omnisend, it will auto update, which is great. So like for spam risk, rather than just having a flat list of like, here's the 7,000 people we think might be, if it's set up properly, and I'm happy to answer any questions on this, it'll be based on timelines. So like if somebody hasn't opened any of our things in a year and has never visited our website, we'll put them in a win back sequence. If they don't engage there, we'll give them a final offer. And if you know, and they're still not opening, they might go into spam risk, but it's updating every day. And that's a great part about Omnisend, where it's dynamic. It's not static and then waiting. So that's the segments I would recommend from the start. And I think there's a lot of great parts about Omnisend on how it's set up, which I would encourage all of you to use to get out of any potential deliverability issues. Just proactively block it out. So for example, if you want to send SMS, as a broad frame, SMS generally is a little bit, you have to be more careful on SMS than email to make sure you don't run into delivery problems. So one easy way we do that on SMS is send a basic filter here that we only want to send our texts later in funnel for campaigns to people who've gotten an SMS from us. So they've gotten through the welcome series and they've never had message delivery failed, because otherwise you're wasting money and potential domain reputation to send a text to that audience. So use those filters to your benefit. There's a ton of them, and it should proactively prevent any issues. Similarly, use all the data that flows into Omnisend to your advantage, especially if you're on Shopify or another platform that integrates. We use as much data as we can. So like not only is a user opening or clicking an email, I think that's a great piece of data, and we use it right here. Like if somebody's clicking, I want to know that, but also have they viewed a web page in the last 24 months? And not just any web page, but if we're doing a release on this one product, I want to know if they bought it last year or the year before that. So we'll filter segments up to, if we're doing an SMS follow-up campaign, has this person clicked on the email or opened the email? Or have they viewed this page in the last 12 months? Or have they ever purchased this product? Or have they ever opened any email relevant to that category? So use that to your advantage. Again, this is one that I think there's a misconception that it takes a lot of time. It doesn't. Like we can throw a segment together in, I don't know, 5 minutes, maybe, if it's taken really long. Like it's not a crazy complicated one. I know in spirit, it sounds really intense. And then once you get it set up, we'll duplicate campaigns and you just change the variable on what the actual product is. But we have a reactivation segment set up that runs across the board. You just change the product name. So definitely use that. Best practices on campaigns, we would recommend definitely rotate and test your sending time slots. Like it doesn't need to be every day, but rotate. See if early morning works better for some audiences, afternoon, use that data to inform. And then the biggest one is make sure there's a clickable call to action up here in the upper third of your emails. A common issue we see is that brands don't have any call to action on the upper third. And the issue we see a lot is there's a lot of people who are lazy like me who open an email on their phone and they don't scroll. So if one of your consumers is somebody like me, you lose them because they don't engage there. So we usually see anywhere from 30 to 35% of clicks on an email occur in that upper third. And it's a lot of low-hanging fruit. Like there's a really nice footer, and that can get brought to the top as well. So you have at the top of the email and the bottom of the email. I would use more of a broad sense, like here for the bats, like this is a specific collection. Shop any bat, shop any year, explore new releases. They're broad things that regardless of if this email is for the consumer, there's probably a good opt-in or engagement opportunity. So how often? I get asked this question all the time. What's the best way to send? And it's going to change for different brands, and I think each brand has a little bit of a difference, but anybody on your base who's not on your spam risk, who you feel comfortable sending to, we think should be getting sent mail 1 to 2 times a week. Keeps them engaged. If you drop below that, I think it confuses people and it's almost surprising to get an email. We'd recommend, like we do for most brands a weekly email on a Monday or on a Sunday at around the same time where we know consumers are expecting that weekly email from us at a good time on top of any ad hoc releases or exciting updates. And then you're engaged in buyers. So these are those 30, 60, 90-day, 180-day people. We would send to those 5 to 7 emails a week, but we would ensure that the preference-based emails go to the right audience. So on a typical one, let's say we were doing a fast pitch release for this softball. We would send just to fast pitch purchasers and somebody on fast pitch who's viewed product in the last 65 days and somebody that's ever engaged in the last 90, or they're interested in fast pitch on that original opt-in form, plus anybody who's most engaged. So they've clicked in the last 45 days or they've opened 5 emails in the last 90 days. So that core engaged, hyper engaged base is getting every email on top of individual preference-based people who might not be hyper engaged. So that's our general baseline. It changes by brand, but those are the general framing. The power of automations. This is a crazy stat that I found out from Omnisend when they ran a report. Automated emails generate 37% of sales, which we see in line with a lot of our clients. Only 2% of total sends are automations. So only 2% of the total volume most brands are sending accounts for 37% of revenue. Huge opportunity there. Here's the 5 that we would recommend just as a baseline. And again, I know it sounds like a lot. They really should take no more than 20, 30 minutes to set up. There's great templates. It's not that complicated. And then you can get very complex. You could have an agency, you could have a person set up. What are the more complicated ones? But off the top, these 5 are relatively straightforward. We'd recommend a welcome series, an abandoned cart, abandoned checkout. The only difference there is, did somebody actually get to a checkout page or did they just hit a cart page? A little bit of a different buying behavior and how we view that. And then win back customer reactivation with the example we spoke about. Somebody hasn't opened an email in 180 days. Do we want to give them an offer to win them back? And then product abandonment. So this is a cool one where, let's say I visit a landing page, but I never put it in cart. That data still feeds into Omnisend, and you can send a different thing on, hey, we saw you were looking at this. So those are the 5 I would recommend to kick off with. Platform side list hygiene. This is, I think, the last thing on the foundations. Then we'll run into scale. But this is where we run into brands who say, hey, we don't know why our emails aren't going through, or running into a lot of failed delivery problems or open rates and click rates. Omnisend has this great dashboard here. So we pulled an old example where if you see, hey, all of these platforms are great, but oh my God, on your guys' thing, 15% open rate on one platform versus 45 is your baseline. What's the issue on that platform? And a lot of times there's just certain providers that you need to change the way you send your emails to do it. We would highly recommend checking your SPF, DKIM, and DMARC records. All that means is you do it externally of Omnisend. It's very easy to set up. And it's essentially just making sure that you're set up with the email service providers where if you say you're Joe's brand, that when you send an email, Google knows that you are actually Joe's brand and you're not pretending to do it. It's a very easy thing to set up. A lot of brands, either it's not set up properly or it hasn't been updated. So it's just not properly delivering or it's going to junk. Look at your performance by domain down here and then frequently clean and tag. So like, just make sure, I'd say once a quarter, run a clean of your list, throw out the poor quality ones. And then any of these disposable, unknown, or unidentified, we run through just like a reactivation sequence. And based on how they respond, tag them, either add them back to the list or kick them out. And then external deliverability, check your Omnisend sender reputation. And then highly recommend going on Google Postmaster. If you don't have an account, set it up. A vast majority of email users obviously use Gmail, and it gives you a bunch of good data. A key one I would look at is here on user reported spam. If you go above 0.3%, you get put in timeout temporarily by Google, like throws up a flag and you're more likely to hit spam or promotions. So definitely keep an eye on that. It's a good indicator of like, hey, this email must have caused a lot of spam risk outside of just what you're seeing on Omnisend. And then you could run Mailgun tests or any other inbox placement tests just to see where you're landing in different inboxes. So on Google, are you landing as marketing versus on iCloud, are you landing in primary inboxes? And on Hotmail, are you landing in spam and why? So that's what we would do from an external deliverability standpoint. Quick foundations checklist, because I know that was a lot. Here are the list of things that we would recommend you do just to get your thing from 0 to 1. So set up an opt-in form, drive those people to the actual welcome sequence that's best for them. Use those 8 kickoff segments, rotate time slots, and then test your sending cadence. And then on the back, more tactically, add a call to action to any of the upper third of your email, launch those 5 automation flows, and then just make sure your deliverability and inbox placement looks good. So that covers the foundations. If anybody has questions, feel free to let me know, or we can cover them at the end just on the foundation stuff. Next, we're going to hop into, okay, have this set up. How do you scale? All right, so this is a very quick chart showing how we view scaling email names into revenue. So you can run paid traffic. So we use Meta or Google to drive traffic to the website with that offer. So like you saw in the initial one, like join our $500 shopping spree. We'll use that as the lead magnet on Meta, Google, whatever the channel is. Those people hit the landing page, they sign up for the email list. Of those, some become buyers of that list. We'll then put it back into Meta, back into Google, and say, hey, can you build me lookalike audiences of more people like that? And then it becomes a smarter paid traffic list, and it almost becomes evergreen, because for every 1,000 new people that come into the list, your lookalike audience gets even smarter, which makes it cheaper to keep acquiring those names. So we view that paid traffic leads to more names, leads to more buyers, leads to more engaged lists, which leads to a smarter paid traffic list that goes right back in a circle. So for just to give some numbers on an example here, and I'll show the actual more tactical numbers on the next slide. But last year, a client account had 39,000 new contacts enter their site just via a welcome sequence. Those sequences alone, just the welcome sequence, drove $246,000 in revenue. So each name was worth $6, and our acquisition cost was far underneath that for a name. And again, not every person bought, but in aggregate, each name was worth $6 because we only needed, let's call it, one out of every six to buy to make it worth it. So by the time they'd completed the welcome sequence, we had already recovered customer acquisition costs and were profitable. And remember, there's a massive lifetime value on email. You own that name forever, and you could send to that name forever. So by the time they'd gotten out of the 4 or 5 email welcome sequence, we were net positive. So that was great. And most business owners we've worked with said, I'd love to run that as high as I can for as long as I can because it works. So here's the math behind it. So this was an example of one of the Facebook bait pieces we used, like sign up to enter a shopping spree giveaway, be the first to hear about sales, deals, releases, etc. This then went to that opt-in landing page, and we were getting clicks very cheap, and we would use lookalike audiences. So we'd have all of our subscribers get thrown in for a lookalike, which is basically telling Meta or Google, here's my subscribers currently, here's my purchasers currently that have opted in. Can we build an audience like them? And they're pretty good at it. Meta and Google know what they're doing on that side to do targeting. So our link clicks have gotten cheaper, the volume has gotten higher, and it becomes just a machine. Like the math just funnels in and out on ensuring that you're adding more volume to your list, but also it's becoming cheaper to do. And then you end up making money on them on the back. And then the only other one, and then we can talk about questions or any Q&A stuff, but our recommendation is make sure you implement SMS. It's another low-hanging fruit one, and you have to be a little more careful. But some quick data that we've seen, it typically increases engagement on the web by 14% compared to users who don't get SMS messages. And typically it has a 30% revenue lift in purchase and subscription conversion over accounts that don't incorporate it. So how we use SMS is as a couple ways. Number one, on a welcome series, I think it's a no-brainer to use as a double opt-in. So somebody subscribes, they get a text, you immediately send to them and confirm they're a good name. Can you reply? I'm sure all of you have gotten these texts or used them, like reply Y if you opted in and here's your discount. So we would highly recommend using that. And then at the end of an abandoned cart, that thing crushes for a lot of clients where somebody gets 2 or 3 emails, they might not engage. And the final one is it's like, last call, your product's almost gone, click here. And that on SMS, the engagement skyrockets. And then as a one-off follow-up on users who engage with a specific email, we use that a lot. So here's an example, like this email went out, this is a portion of the email, like a release. And then we waited a day and looked at anybody who opened or clicked with that email but didn't purchase and gave them a quick, and this is a very easy segment. This is like what I spoke about earlier on how we have it as a template almost. So for every release, we do the same process. And then the next day they got an SMS, like the exclusives here, just in case you missed it, shop before it's gone. And that SMS put up a really sizable amount of numbers in addition to the email on performance on revenues on a conversion standpoint. So we would highly recommend adding SMS to the back. And then here's the checklist. Again, it's a little bit shorter, but I think it's far more efficient when you hone it in, was download your subscribers and build a lookalike. I think that's a no-brainer. And then test paid traffic to drive new users. And in a perfect world, if you adjust and optimize, you should be able to recover your acquisition cost during your welcome sequence. So you're profitable on the front, and then add SMS as an add-on to your campaigns and automations. So here's our website. Here's a QR code you're welcome to scan. I'm happy to answer any questions. If you have follow-up questions on this, more than happy to give any feedback. If you have questions about specific parts of the deck, happy to. And then again, anybody from Omnisend, whether we're the right fit, if you need an external agency or not, I'm happy to chat with anybody and send you or give you suggestions on the right way to proceed forward. But that is the best place to reach out. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, anywhere you'd expect to find me. But I think we want to do some Q&A on top of that. Faye, is that right?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jesse. That was so helpful. And for everyone asking, you will receive the recording and you will receive the deck as well. So you can actually go, through the checklist, make sure everything is set up on your side. So don't worry about that. A couple of things that stood out to me when you were presenting, Jesse, it was about collecting data. There are so many ways to collect so many different data points. And I think as like, especially smaller businesses, we don't want to bother people. We become timid and we're like, oh, I don't want to bother people. And one thing from my side, and I'd like to know your ideas on that as well. From my side of things and my experience, people and consumers are already adapted to the fact that there's going to be a pop-up, or there's going to be questions, or if you want a discount, well, you got to give something in return. So people are already adjusted to that. And they probably already forgotten that there were like 2 pop-ups, and the ones that are reaching out to you, those are the outliers. There's the minority of people that are genuinely bothered by it. So Jesse, when it comes to that data collection, like what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think very similar to what you said. The expectation, I think, from consumers is that exists. And we hear it a lot from brands on, I don't want to send an email 5 days a week because that's spammy. And then I say, look in your inbox on any of the brands that you engage with. How often are they sending? And they are. And I look at it more as people are expecting to get emails. As long as you're giving them what they want and you're not spamming, it should be informative or educational. I wouldn't send 7 sales emails a week, but I would put in a couple sales emails, a couple product information things, an educational piece here. And then on opt-in and top of funnel stuff, I think it's so just ingrained in consumer psychology at this point that like if you want to be able to enter something, you have to put in info and pop-ups. And again, you can split test. And typically what we see is there's lift across the board. And even if it reduces a little bit of opt-in, the opt-ins are far better. So in aggregate, they perform much better. But yeah, I think people have adapted where they expect it. And as long as you do it with non-spammy, nice looking, clean stuff, it performs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like what you mentioned as well, we have those hyper engaged customers. And from my experience working from skincare to supplements to other brands and industries, there's always going to be those super fan segments. Those people are crazy about, there might be, as we were talking about sports, they might be just crazy about it. And they really don't mind getting those emails. So trust us, there's always that segment that's very excited for it.
Yeah, and
And yeah, go
one
on.
other thing to add on when you're giving info, we would just highly, if you're going to ask for the info, make sure you use it. So like if you're going to ask for preferences and a bunch of info, use that to guide the actual decisions. Like don't just ask and then still send people everything. Like if you're going to use it, make it a better user experience for them so you don't annoy consumers and it's helpful to them. But my thesis is if you're going to use it, collect it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. It's like so many times, like I submitted the info hoping to get those recommendations and I still get very generic things. That's when your customer is going to get upset. That's not because you ask, but when it's irrelevant information after you already given them what you're looking for.
100%.
And another thing to add on to that, you mentioned abandoned cart, abandoned checkout, abandoned product emails. And I think it's often, again, being that timid business, I don't want to bother people kind of thing. But guys, remember, everyone has such short attention spans. Like people already forgotten about their brand, and because everyone's switching between screens now. So I have my laptop, I have my phone. I don't even remember which device I have your shop on. So if you remind them, and again, being very tactful about it, again, they're gonna love it and appreciate it. And if it's irrelevant to them, they're just gonna ignore it. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that comes back to like, don't be spammy, don't send bad looking stuff. But if you send polished, quick follow up that makes sense, I think it's a value add. I like to know
Exactly.
when, like, I forget all the time. I'm like on a checkout page and then I get a call and then I'm like, oh, I thought I ordered that. So
I
I think
know.
if it's used right, it's great.
Absolutely. We have one question in the Q&A box, but before we go there, um, an observation about this whole roadmap that you shared was so many, again, small to medium business owners, there's often a misconception that you only use paid advertising to sell a specific product, instead of collecting leads. And I think, and I would like to know your opinion on that as well, but if I faced those people before who were like, well, I don't want to even open my Meta Business Manager because I don't know, I'll press a button, I'll pay $1,000 on something that I didn't want to do. So there's that big, inner fear that people might have, like, okay, I don't have a paid advertising person, and now I still want to try it because I see so much value here, or I want to replicate this roadmap. So what would be your advice for those people who are like, okay, I want to do it, but I just so scared, I'll spend so much money, I don't know how to set up, like what's happening?
Yeah, I think the nice part about doing it to opt-ins rather than specific product is it should be easier to track because it's not directly tied to, oh, we need to update this SKU and run traffic on this SKU. It should be an evergreen campaign that you're just running top of funnel. And you can, what I like about it is you can see sort of the macro business effects instead of on a product level on your business. Like, how many subscribers did we get this month versus last month? It's a relatively easy benchmark. And how much revenue did we get in an automation sequence versus what we had prior? And it should be relatively simple. Like the only checklist I would have on it is make sure you have a good lookalike audience, which should be relatively straightforward. And then test a couple lead magnets and run it to a landing page. And that should give you at least enough data to test off of, but it's not as complicated as, hey, we want to roll out running product specific paid ads on 75 different things that we definitely need to run a full-time person on.
Absolutely. And one of like probably my most repeated tip for people like that is, just go into your business manager and set up a campaign and don't launch it. See if it's all set up. Once you kind of like triple checked however many times you needed to check it, then launch it. And you can also, limit how much you want to spend on it. So do not rush if you're uncertain about those things. But you can always just set things up, don't launch it, do it the next day when you have a clear head.
I totally agree.
Awesome. So we have a question from Sarah, and she's asking, was there one thing you did with the sports company that stood out when you scaled their revenue? One thing that changed their game?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things, but the main one that was a no-brainer was figuring out a sustainable way to grow their list and also make sure they were capturing names because they were having multiple traffic sources and people that were hitting the site, it was binary. They either bought a product or they didn't. And if they didn't, there was no info retained on them or used. And if they did buy a product, there still really wasn't anything being used on it besides just, okay, they're a buyer. So number one, it was what are we doing with buyers and non-buyers? Like what's our marketing and what does email marketing look like to turn that into a real revenue source? What do our automations look like for that type of stuff? But then number two is scaling the list, like being able to grow the list sustainably and profitably became huge for them because we could just keep running it as high as we want. And we will continue to do that because the math works. So set the foundation, number one, make sure that we have a process for when people come to the site, how they're handled. And then number two, dump fuel on the fire by adding new people to the list.
Yeah, awesome. And I think going back to the foundations as well, like, yay, get that traffic, get those subscribers. But if you're not ready to, acknowledge them, send them welcome series or engage them, then don't launch the ads. Like fix the basics first.
100%. I totally agree. And I see, and I
Yeah.
think there's another Q&A that just came through.
Yeah. I'll have a look.
And then I see one in chat too. So we will get to
Yeah.
both.
Yeah. So the one Anthony is asking, I wanted your opinion on something. We have around a 350,000 email list. That's great.
Yeah,
We
that's
have
great.
been sending sales emails every day. We have now stopped. Um, Anthony, there's not the other, there's not the other half for that one. But
I'm happy to
well,
answer the question. Oh, we want to start over. How do we handle the old versus new clients?
yes.
Okay, well, there's definitely opportunity there, especially if you have 350,000 names. That's enough to really start running a real reactivation campaign off of. But my recommendation would be I think you need a reactivation campaign on the existing old base and make sure you do it in a clean way. And then also build a new welcome sequence for net new people coming through with the hope that once you run those through, let's call it probably 30 days to start warming up the old list on top of the new people. You can then run joint campaigns on the back. So I would run them as two automations concurrently and then start leading them into one combined list that you're running actual campaigns to. But if you have 350,000 names, there's definitely an opportunity there, and I'm more than happy to give feedback if helpful. Feel free to send me.
Awesome. One thing that came to my mind about that is when you're like reactivating campaigns, and Jesse, tell me if I'm way off here, but from my personal experience as someone who received emails like that, is let's say you signed up to a list and then for a year, if not longer, no emails. And suddenly you're like, hey, buy from us. And I'm like, that is just too harsh. And I'm like, I don't even remember I subscribed to you. What do you sell? So kind of like that kind of soft reintroduction of like, hey guys, we're back, and I'm like, okay, they're back. Who are they?
Yeah.
Are they still relevant to me?
100%. And I think an easy way to do it, and I think it gets underrepresented in industry, is you can have all these pretty designs, and we do that for most campaigns. But as a reactivation, a simple like note written from the owner, from the CMO of like, hey, here's the story. Like, we know you were engaged. We haven't sent to you in a while. This is what we do. As a reminder, here, we'd love to give you a discount. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Goes miles ahead of like a crazy designed email. And then you put them in your normal sequence with your nice, pretty emails and you can make it look clean. But people will forget. I forget what I did this morning, let alone an email I subscribed to a year ago. So you almost need to re-educate and treat them like a new consumer coming back in and give them the same stuff you would give to a new person, except they're probably a little warmer because they did engage at one point.
Yeah, that is excellent. I had a question again, going to what you shared. So, given that different companies have different resource constraints, some people are doing all their marketing and all their other things. Some have bigger teams, some have freelancers and all that. And how how do you identify which automations to start with? And I don't want to give it away, but I'm thinking, okay, I have this list. I want to set up everything. How do me as a single business owner, maybe I'm doing my marketing. How do I approach this without getting overwhelmed?
Yeah, I think honestly, if you want to just get the base core simple stuff set up, you can do it using the templates. Like Omnisend has clean templates and like, can you get way more complicated? 100%. Like that's what we do all day. But as a base level thing, you can get a relatively workable funnel and you can test it. Like you can test it, you can send test emails, you can do test triggers, like make sure it works, won't break anything. But you can get a very simple welcome series probably set up in a half hour to an hour once you have the design. Like it's not crazy complicated. And I would probably just start with the ones I listed earlier. Like I'd set up the welcome series first. I'd set up an abandoned cart and checkout next. And then I would do win back and then I would do product abandonment. And I would keep it that simple. And then you get way more complicated after. But I'd say probably 80 to 85% of your automation revenue will probably come from one of those five anyway, even if you add 20 new ones.
Absolutely. And also, I can't quote the data exactly, but the latest I've seen is, which I totally agree with, and it makes total sense, is majority of your people, they will convert from the first email you sent from the welcome series. Because when they submitted their data, their email, they probably had an intention to get a discount and buy from you.
100%. Like it's warmer. Like if they ever intended on doing it, you could treat them a little bit differently because they already had an expectation to join at one point.
Yeah, exactly. And then, again, there are so many flows and you share, different segments and everything. So how do you keep tabs on how each each automation is performing? How do you not get overwhelmed?
We just do a weekly check-in on every client account across the board. So like Friday is reporting day for me. And all we'll do just running spreadsheets. Like it doesn't need to be as complicated, but like what was the only core metrics that we're paying attention to per channel is how many were sent, because that indicates, especially on a welcome series, on an abandoned, like, is there an issue? Are we up or down? So like how many people added to the list on an automation, how many messages were sent, what is open rate, what is click rate, what is failed or spam, and then what's revenue. And we just check what is that versus last year, same time period, and last week. So we do year over year and then week over week to track indicators. And you should be able to tell pretty quickly once you look at the data enough, like that looks weird. What is it? And usually in a little bit of digging, it's either some triggers broken from something or an offer changed, or there's usually or one domain performance is down and you need to look at your deliverability. But it's a good way for us to check the larger macro account because the automations are getting sent nonstop. So you can see if something slips through the cracks pretty easily.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good advice. I think, not overwhelming yourself, just get the benchmarks done. And then if something's out of ordinary, you know that you need to check that out and then slowly come back to other ones. And then, again, it's usually something in the back end, something easily fixed. And if you're still having any issues, we have support at Omnisend. Maybe consider getting an agency help as well, so they can help you with that. So guys, do we have any other Q&As on the topic? And then we'll answer one last question, which I think is fun. Okay. So the question is, tips to people starting a career in email marketing in e-commerce. And I think you're a very qualified person to answer this question since you've been in the business since you were 16. So any tips or if you were starting it over again, what tips would you give yourself?
Yeah, I think client service is number one. Like you got to know where you sit in the ecosystem and how you can be helpful and just learn a lot. Like this ecosystem is changing so much that I would just dive in and learn the tools, like learn how AI is impacting some of this stuff, learn the process on email, get experience doing it with a couple of clients, do it freelancing to start, prove your chops within it. And then there's so much content. Like we did a great webinar, I don't know how long ago it was 2 weeks, and it was literally built on this question on how to be an efficient agency owner. And it was me, it was Jimmy and Chase, and then Nick, who are all great agency owners. And it was literally just tactically how to build and scale an agency. So I'd highly recommend you watch that recording. But yeah, I would say like just get in the weeds, play around with some clients on doing it in practice rather than just learning, and scale. And there's so much technology now to be able to learn different tools and be valuable that I think a lot of clients just want somebody who understands it and spends all day. But coming to things like this is probably a great start.
Absolutely. And I think this is also valid for people, again, who are running their own businesses, and then they're also doing their email marketing. There's so much data. There are so many tips that you can learn from. We have our webinars. We have blogs that you can check out. Again, we have our support team, and tools like ours, like at Omnisend. We're very happy to answer any questions you might have, and I'm sure Jesse's would be very happy to answer any questions you might have as well. Because again, things are changing so fast. So even if we tell you some things now, it might be relevant next week with all the changes.
This ecosystem changes so fast that what's current now might not be current at noon. So there's a lot of stuff. Definitely take advantage of all of the content, resources, etc. And yeah, the Omnisend team's great. Just both from an agency perspective, and their partner program is awesome. And then for brands, like I think we talked about this on the agency webinar, but the number one indicator that I use when I'm bringing clients onto a platform is, can I trust that number one is the product good, but number two is the customer service good? Because if Black Friday comes around and there's a problem, who's responding? And Omnisend's been great. So I would highly encourage taking advantage of the resource team because they're awesome.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, Jesse, thank you so much for this. Again, guys, you will receive the recording and you will receive the slides as well. So you can go through it. We will include Jesse's contact information as well, and you can reach out to him. And yeah, thank you so much for being here, and we will see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.